It is time to huddle up at the Weekly Huddle podcast because draft season doesn't stop, and neither do we. Once again, Newt Westen joining you for another summer scouting positional ranking. This time, really excited because we are now flipping to the defensive side of the football. That's right. We're getting into the defensive player groupings, starting with our defensive line this week. We'll work trenches out to edges, linebackers, and then DBs in the coming weeks to really wrap up all of those position groups. But as I said, focusing on the trenches for today. Really excited for this because this is one of the position groups I actually got an opportunity last year to work with Owen on over at the Draft Professor. And as you can see behind me over here, I was able to write them up for Cheesehead TV. So a position group that by both nostalgia and just my love for the play that happens in the trenches is something that I'm really excited to talk about today. So as we get into this, I'm going to run my 10 through 6 kind of in descending order as I see these guys. I got a chance to watch 11 guys for this, so by no means am I saying that this is like the end-all be-all for my rankings. But then after that, we'll hit my top 5 guys that I really have liked so far after getting into this. A little bit of a side note, Devontae Capehart, I did get a chance to watch. He did not make the top 10 for me, but definitely a player I had eyes on. I think he's going to be a draftable player, but he doesn't fall in my top 10 as of right now. So with that being said, let's go ahead and let's get started with this list. And no better way to kick it off than with a nose tackle, Caden McDonald out of Ohio State University. Now, this might be a name that you haven't heard a ton of because, shocker, the entire Ohio State line got drafted last year. So he was playing behind the 2 defensive tackles, Hamilton and Tyleik Williams, and he saw action in rotations and in blowout games. So a little bit of limited footage to take a look at, but kind of judging from the footage that I got a chance to see, I did like aspects of his game, especially as an early down run defender. I think he's got a really stout build. He's put together very well for the nose tackle position, which is where I really see him leaning towards. I think he could play a 3-tech, but ultimately I think he would fall really nice into an odd front with that shade nose, 0-tech, 1-tech, however you want to line him up with regards to that. I think that for him, he's got really good awareness, and that's also going to be something that pairs well on those early downs. He's a very heads-up player, always tracking the ball, and does a really good job of flowing to that, and has kind of the instincts for that. And I think ultimately he's just a little bit raw because of his age. He's only a true junior coming in, and the number of snaps he's played, it's less than 250 career snaps. So by no means anything where, he's not putting the work in. I think he just is a player that needs to develop a little more. He's definitely a player that I could see moving up my board because of just that gain in experience. But right now, as I see him, it is kind of within there. The other thing that pulls him back for me, and it's kind of true with all 1-techs, not all of them, but I should say most 1-techs, he's not going to be a dynamic pass rusher. That might change, but ultimately I see him being really, like I said, an early down player, and if you're only going to be on the field 2 out of 3 snaps, to me, that's going to knock you a little bit. Not that there's anything wrong with that or that player isn't necessary. However, it doesn't necessarily scream to me that you are a high-value prospect to pick from. So, Caden McDonald comes in here at number 10. Really well-built nose tackle with a lot to prove in an exciting year upon him. Definitely might be a player that doesn't even end up coming out this year, but have eyes on him as he is, once again, entering his 3rd year of college football. So, moving on from him, we have Dante Corleone, the Godfather himself, as he's been nicknamed, with that fitting very well. He is a player that has had his name cycling throughout a couple draft cycles right now. And if you don't know a lot about Corleone, the biggest thing that's going to surround him is going to be probably health concerns. He had blood clots back in the spring of 2024. I think he's had some other issues with that kind of leading up to it. So something where that's going to follow him, I would imagine, a little bit throughout this cycle. He did play all of last year, and he played quite well last year. I wouldn't say like blowing the top off. In fact, in his true junior year, I'm sorry, true sophomore year, he had what was just a phenomenal season. So, um, a player that has an opportunity to kind of build off of that now that he's become a little bit more steady. But for him, he's got a really solid build, powerful lower body. He does have a shorter frame to him, so he's only 6'1", but in that frame, he's really, really well built. He's got a strong base about him. He's going to be another player that I think is really effective on early downs. I think he upholds the point of attack quite well. I do think he's got a little bit more juice in the run game, however. So with those physical limitations, that obviously hurts players a lot of times, but we've seen shorter players still be go out and be able to be effective. I've seen him have a little bit of juice on pass rushing downs, and it's something that I think he really is a hard and a dedicated player, where he's going to give you everything he's got, and I think that shows up on the tape. So a player with a little bit of physical limitations. I don't even know if I'd say athletic. I think he's very explosive, but he's just going to be a shorter frame, shorter arm player that does really well early downs. Definitely plays above his length, but ultimately I think he's probably going to have a ceiling about him. Comes in number 9 for me, Dante Corleone out of Cincinnati. Moving on, we have Lee Hunter, now at Texas Tech. Began actually at Auburn for one season. He redshirted that season, then spent 3 seasons at UCF. His time at UCF was highly decorated. Last year, he was second team All Big 12. The year before that, he was an honorable mention All Big 12. And he's a player that is really reminiscent of, for me, I said Jamari Caldwell last year. I don't give out a ton of comps, but as I was watching him, Jamari Caldwell kept sticking in my head. His teammates have nicknamed him the Fridge. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's his X handle, as well as the _Fridge7. So definitely a player that leans into that. He's got the frame to kind of back that up. 6'4", 320 pounds. He's going to be a player that, once again, he's really well built and well suited for early downs. He's a stout run defender. He, I believe, in his 2 years at UCF, led the nation in that 2-year span in stops, credited to him. Definitely a mark that you love to see when you are looking for production in the run game. If you can get those stops at or near the line of scrimmage, that is a huge statistic to hang your hat on. Also, I like his burst off the line. I think he moves okay. I think he's going to be athletically limited. He moves okay, but nothing special. But I think he does have a pretty good first step. And I think he's got a really strong anchor, especially against double teams. He's going to be able to hold that point of attack really well and make it challenging for blockers to move him off his spot and open up some holes. But like I said, I think he's got a little bit of a lower ceiling just due to some athletic limitations. Might be built more for an early down run defender. And once again, I've said it already, if you're only on the field necessarily 2 out of 3 snaps, it's going to hold you back a little bit in terms of kind of what I think you can be. He is raw in his pass rush plan. I think that he has some room to grow there, and maybe he can flourish a little bit more. But as of right now, I really see him as an early down run defender, one that does a really good job with it, and the numbers and statistics over these last 2 seasons have showcased. So coming from UCF in his final season of eligibility, transferring to Texas Tech, a player that I'm excited, especially with that Texas Tech roster and what they've done in the transfer portal, to get eyes on him and see what he does as he enters that final year of eligibility. Following him up, we have Tim Keenan, who would be probably if we're talking about true nose tackles, my top graded one tech or nose tackle. He's going to be out of Alabama. Comes in at 6'2", 324 pound. A little bit of a shorter build there, but he's able to really utilize a strong anchor in regards to that and the natural leverage that comes from that shorter build. I think he does a really good job with taking the mass that he brings to position and just making it challenging for offensive linemen to move him off his spot once again. He has a great strength profile, and he's going to be someone that I think could even take that a little bit further. And when you take a look at him on pass rush snaps, that strength profile starts to translate to a pretty solid bull rush, in my opinion, where he's able to move interior offensive linemen off their spot. He's able to do some things in that regard. Of some of the guys that I got a chance to look at already, he's got some of the higher pass rush ratings via PFF. So definitely someone that shows you a little bit more juice in the tank. And obviously really encouraging anytime you have that one tech that's on the field. As much as you can get out of them is definitely advantageous if you can start to use them across all three downs if they have the conditioning and the pass rush potential. It's definitely giving you a really big bang for your buck. And I think Tim Keenan III could even take a step further to unlock it this year, just due to that, like I said, that strength, that burst off the line, and some of those raw tools that he really brings to the table. He's a player that, because of that height, he's also going to have some shorter arms, does show up once he gets locked in with longer blockers. Once again, his hand technique is raw. He needs to improve that. I think that goes a long way in improving his pass rush plan and being able to become a true three down defender. True nose tech. I think he could play some three tech if he was asked to. In fact, at Alabama, he did play the majority of his snaps at three tech, but still played about a third of his snaps, if not a little bit more, out at that one tech position. So a player that I really see kind of finding a nice home there, but does have a little bit of versatility to him as well. So Tim Keenan III, out of Alabama, coming in as a redshirt senior. And then following him up, we have the last player in my back half of the top 10, Zane Durant. Zane Durant's a player that I liked actually a lot. I kind of have him in a tier of his own. I would say that Lee Hunter and Tim Keenan III and also Corleone are also probably pretty close. And then Durant, I would put a little bit above those guys. I think that with Durant, you get a very athletic defensive tackle. And athleticism is obviously something that I love to see. It's not necessarily like the biggest thing for me, but man, you can see it right away. He has a stellar first step. Like, he absolutely explodes off the line. Really active hands. He's consistently using them to meet the linemen, swatting their hands out of the way, keeping his chest as clean as possible, and trying to dictate that hand fight at the line of scrimmage. His work ethic is also just off the charts stellar. You can tell on every snap that he is approaching it like he's not going to be on the field for another one. And it's just something that when you see that, for me especially, that's a stat, that's a characteristic and a quality that really, really stands out. So I think that he, unlike a lot of the players that we talked about, brings a high amount of athleticism and speed to the position. However, one of the things that he does kind of give up in regards to that is going to be some play strength. He comes in at 6'1", so shorter already, but then 288 pounds. So the base and the anchor that he plays with, you would imagine is going to be a little bit lessened, and on tape I saw that as well. He, especially when linemen get their hands on him, you can just see he's kind of neutralized at that point. He wins specifically off speed, off of a quick counter, and if he can't do that, then especially when he's going up against some of the more stout guards and even centers that he might see along the interior offensive line, he really has no answer if he has to go through those guys. So when you take a look at that, you take a look at a guy that he's winning with finesse, he's winning with that speed. He might sacrifice also a little bit then in the run game. Not as much as you think, really. I think that he does a really good job, but he's not going to be a guy that's going to hold up to double teams really well. Not that he's going to receive a ton of them per se, but he does enough in the run game with run defense that I feel confident at least having him out there and saying that he is adequate, and he has such a high athletic ceiling where I think if he can become a little bit more refined in his technique with his pass rush plan, then he can really start to jump up charts. One thing with him also, and it's a couple of these guys, him being the first one that this really starts to impact, is just going to be a poor tackling technique. And I don't want to even say technique, but he's just had really high missed tackle percentage over the course of his career. I want to say he's got like an average of almost 20%, 21.4 this last year. So something that I'd love to see cleaned up as well that would start to kind of pop him up my board a little bit more. So Zane Durant out of Penn State comes in at number 6 for me. And with that, we get to my top 5 interior defensive linemen, my 1 text, my 3 texts. Just as we kind of flip the script then to the top 5, if you guys have been enjoying this content, please, please, please hit that thumbs up button, hit that like button. Really helps us out. I appreciate it. Owen appreciates it. Definitely something that goes a long way. A lot more than you might even realize. And then also, once again, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button so you guys can see what's coming up as we start to get to these additional defensive positions along the, or I should say, within this 2026 class. We hit an edge next week, and then, like I said, linebackers and DBs. So a lot more to come. That subscribe button and notifications go a long way to make sure you guys are able to follow along with that. But with that, let's go ahead and get into my top 5. And we start with Darrell Jackson Jr. And this is a player, if you follow along with Draft Professor, me and Owen actually got a chance to talk about last year, as was with a couple of these guys. But Darrell Jackson Jr. specifically, I was a little bit lower on looking at him in last year's draft cycle. And I talked about this with Jake Slaughter in the last ranking video. But as I've kind of started to categorize what I think the attributes of a player are and put them actually on a linear scale, it's really become more apparent to me a lot of the things that Darrell Jackson Jr. brings and just kind of that final step that he needs to take. I think that the first thing that's going to stand out to players is going to be his build. He is 6'5", 330 pounds. He has vines for arms. He is just sculpted extremely well throughout. So not only does he have a great weight profile to him, he carries that weight extremely well for him to be explosive, for him to be dynamic, yet also have a lot of really good play strength about him. He's also a player that quietly, amongst all the players that I have listed here, put up the most pressures per PFF last year. He had 30 credited pressures to him, and that's playing next with Jordan Farmer, who had a heck of a season, and as you know, was a fairly highly drafted defensive lineman in last year's draft, which was a packed group. So Darrell Jackson Jr. has done a lot of things to kind of set himself up really well in this Florida State system. Got a little bit of a lengthy history in terms of what got him here. He actually started at Maryland in 2022, transferred to Miami for a year, and then had to sit out in 2023 due to NCAA transfer rules. Backstory in there, I'm not going to get into right now, but I will definitely be talking about a little bit later on as we get into more the nitty-gritty of the draft cycle. But with that, he was able to do a lot of things that helped him out. He was actually an all-ACC honorable mention last year. So player that made the most of that opportunity once he was finally able to get back on the field for Florida State. So kind of beside all those things that, you know, his build and his background, I think that he is another player that has that really high floor in terms of his pass rush and his run defense. So he brings both sides of the game to the table, and you absolutely love to see that when you can have this guy that you can cash in for 3 downs and you can really just trust him out there. It's the potential for him. It's the athletic profile that he brings, it's the size that he brings, and it is kind of like him quietly getting those 30 pressures and doing those things to set himself up to be a really effective interior defensive lineman. What I need to see out from him now is just him increase his pass rush productivity. With the 30 pressures, I love that. He had 5 sacks on the year. That's solid. I want to start to see some more. He had a really solid win percentage. Can you match that in year 2? Because then I start to feel really, really good, especially when you're not doing it next to Jordan Farmer. I think that really for him, it's just doubling down on the productivity that he had and proving that he's here to play and he's here to stay for those. Once again, though, another player that has to clean up tackles. He had a 21.4 missed tackle percentage last year. I don't think it was as bad throughout the rest of his career, and I know I've heard that missed tackles is not necessarily a stable metric, but it's still something that I want to see cleaned up a little bit. So definitely looking for him to get a little bit better in that regard this season as we look forward. So Darrell Jackson Jr. out of Florida State. Once again, a player that you could definitely hear his name being called towards the top of this list if he really just repeats the stellar performance that he had last year and maybe builds upon a couple of those things that really make and help him to shine. So moving on to number 4, who I have maybe a little bit higher than Darrell Jackson Jr. I'd say probably a tier up now. We're looking at Christian Miller out of Georgia. And you hear a Georgia defensive lineman, and you probably immediately start to perk up. And this guy, I think, does deliver in a really good way. Maybe not as some of the big splashy names as of the past, but I still think Christian Miller is probably the next player in a really long lineage of Georgia trench players to really stand out. One thing before I even get into him, he did have a shoulder injury at the end of last year. So he's coming in to his redshirt junior season. And with that, I think that this is probably the year he's looking to really cap. Obviously, he's got a year of eligibility left after this. He does not have to come out. But I would imagine that kind of with a lot of the hype and the buzz around him, and especially if he can stay healthy and be a consistent player on the field for Georgia, he'll be looking to come out. So we'll see how that shoulder injury has healed up and how he's recovered from that as we get into this season. Some of the things I really like about him, number 1, he comes with a really good size, 6'4", 305 pounds. Maybe I'd like him a little bit heavier, but I think that the lighter frame allows him to play with some good twitch, and he doesn't give up a ton of play strength. I don't think he's like the strongest guy out there, but I think he has adequate play strength. But man, he is so quick twitched off the line. And I will take that any day if he's able to maybe play a little bit later and then have that burst off the line. He is tenacious in his pass rush. His active feet, active hands are always, trying to get around a blocker, trying to stack and shed a blocker, and really anything that he can do. Another player with a really, really high motor. I love to see that. I think he is really good in his pass rush productivity. He's a player that has stood out with a really high pass rush grade per PFF, and has really, even kind of in regards to what Georgia has done, been able to flourish in a really stacked group. I do think with him that he is still very raw in that. I think that he needs to continue to develop a little bit of a better plan. I like the tenacity that he plays with, and I like what he's been able to do thus far, kind of with that just pure athleticism. But he is going to probably be looked at as a really well-rounded prospect. He's got really good run defense grades, and I think if he can add on to that and really round himself out well, he's going to be another player that you look at and say, man, if you can be on the field for us all 3 downs, if you already have a high floor as a run defender, but now you add on pass rush productivity, that's going to be an absolute blast off for him in terms of where he could be on people's boards on various position rankings. So Christian Miller, I think a really fun player, very high floor, and has the athleticism to really push himself up even higher on this list into definitely the top three. If he can develop a little bit more of a pass rush plan, and turn some of those, pressures into like actual sacks and get a little bit more of that stat sheet productivity out of himself. So, comes in at number 4 for me. And as we do that, we get into the top three. 3 and 2, I really like. Both of these guys, I think, are a ton of fun. Aaron Graves, senior out of Iowa, comes in at number 3 for me. And man, I was really upset as I put the numbers in and kind of saw where it spit him out at that he wasn't number 2. I think hats off to number 2 because, as I'll talk about in a second, he is all deserving of that. But man, Aaron Graves is a fun player. I don't do this with a lot of guys, but I'm just going to read through the notes that I have for him, just accolades, achievements, those sorts of things that he's kind of built his resume with. So comes in his 4th year at the University of Iowa. He's a multiple preseason All-American and All-Big Ten recipient for this upcoming season. So a lot of hype already around him. 2024, All-Big Ten honorable mention. 2024, the Iowa Team All-Hustle Award. He's a 2-time academic All-Big Ten winner. He is a 2-time high school Adidas All-American, junior and senior, won that or had that opportunity. The 2021 High School Iowa Gatorade Player of the Year for football, and he was the 2021 High School Max Preps National Male Athlete of the Year. Absolutely ridiculous resume piece that he has right there. He holds the I should say this. He played 2 ways in high school, offensive and defensive line. He also is the punter. He holds the high school record for career sacks, tackles, the longest punt, and highest punting average. He played basketball. He was a wrestler, track and field thrower. He holds the school record for shot put. And on top of all of that, by the time he graduated high school, he had already earned his associate's degree from the local community college. Absolute, just jack of all trades. When you talk about he is a multi-sport athlete, he brings it both on and off the field, and really in run defense, in pass rush productivity. You see that well-rounded nature about him as well. He's an extremely high motor football, which not surprising when I start to see those things stack up. He's a player that looks to get it done down in and down out. He has a solid understanding of hand usage. He is absolutely tenacious when it comes to keeping his opposing offensive linemen engaged in his hand fight, and he gets at their chest very quickly, easily stacks and sheds. And there's a lot of guys that they'll do it every now and then, but it felt very consistent with him, where he would stack them up, get an offensive lineman kind of under his control, and then control the direction that he was moving to pursue the running back. Absolutely love to see that from him. He has above average athleticism for the position. I don't think he's like a freak athlete, but it definitely shows up as he moves. I think that with him, he might kind of fall in the realm of I think he's a good run defender. I think he's a great pass rusher. I don't think he's great at either of those. I'm looking to be proven wrong this year. He is another player with kind of the way he plays. I'd expect him to be a little bit better. He's a high missed tackle percentage. Another player that is above 15%, 16.7 for him to be specific. So definitely something that I want to see get cleaned up. And he had some inconsistent performances. There were 4 games this last season that he didn't have a registered pressure, which the way that I see him play, his understanding of the game, I would expect that to be an anomaly. To see it once and to see it 4 times is a little bit striking to me. So see more consistency out of him, kind of see those, games where he's almost hidden, erased, and see him showing up not only when the lights are the brightest, but just week in and week out, consistently getting it done. So Aaron Graves, an absolute my guy for this cycle. Really like everything that he brings. I texted a buddy of mine who got his law degree from Iowa, and I was like, man, I think I'm slowly becoming a Hawkeye fan here. It feels like every Iowa player that comes out, I'm absolutely falling in love with, and Aaron Graves is the next player in that long line of fun Hawkeye prospects. But the player that you could just not knock off for the number 2 position is Caleb Banks. And that is because Caleb Banks is an absolute freak. The guy is 6 feet 5 inches, 325 pounds, and he wears that weight incredibly well. To me, I almost didn't think he was. Talked with a couple of colleagues of mine, and they're like, no, I think he is. Just that height and his build, he wears it extremely well. So that long frame of him is going to be an immediate boost. But then in addition to that, he's kind of freaky as an athlete. When you take a look at the burst that he has, when you take a look at the movement skills, he's got great lateral movement to kind of take a jump just to the right and really put interior offensive linemen on a swivel immediately. So that get off paired with his mentality, his length, his active hands, and some pretty decent play strength really put down a great foundation for an interior defensive lineman. And I think Caleb Banks, especially with that length, he's got an opportunity maybe to even flex out to 5 tech. He's the one player that I wrote down like 3 tech or 5 tech for. So you might see him, especially on certain rankings, actually listed as an edge player. I think there's definitely a world where, if it's an odd front, he's probably playing like a 4-eye. If it's an even front, I could see him as a 3 tech, and I could also see him as a 5 tech or defensive end with his hand down in the dirt. But with him, he is inconsistent. He's a player I was talking about, inconsistent stacking and shedding. So just a little bit better with his hand technique. Like I said, he's got active hands, but I think he needs to be a little bit better in understanding like where those are. So like getting your punches to land where you want them to, getting up into the chest of the defender and actually like dictating that point of contact a little bit more. I think going to be important things for him as he continues to grow as a player. And then with that, just increases his pass rush plan, his pass rush ability, because he's got a little bit more technical refinement for that. And then once again, another player that had just too high of a missed tackle percentage. He was 26.1%. Probably one of the worst that I saw. That was not as bad, but kind of consistent as you take a look at his numbers throughout the year. So something that's definitely got to get cleaned up. But he has just that, all the things that you want to see there for like the athletic, the strength, physical traits that he's bringing. If he can really tweak those and refine those, then he's going to be probably a player that's talked about in the top 20, top 15. So Caleb Banks, University of Florida, comes in at number 2, and that leaves pretty comfortably Peter Woods out of Clemson. So I talked about Caleb Banks and Graves being tiered together. Peter Woods is in a completely different atmosphere compared to really everyone else I've talked to, even Banks and Graves. Peter Woods, he brings everything that I've wanted already. He has a stellar pass rush plan. He has a great base when it comes to run defense. Understands how to use his hands, both to swat away and dictate what's going on with an offensive lineman, to run a swim move, to run a long arm. He's just bringing everything that you want. And you might say, if he was able to come out last year, he probably would have been a highly touted recruit in that regard. But we see him back this year as his first year of eligibility. A player that if he does what he did last year, I don't think there'll be any question that he is worthy of a top 10 pick with the build, with the understanding, with the athleticism and movement skills. Realistically, the one thing that I want to see him do, 2 things actually. I want to see him convert more of his pressures into sacks. I want to see him convert more of his win percentage, because he had over a 20% pass rush win percentage on true passing sets, meaning more than 1/5 of the time, if it was like a non-play action, non draw or anything like that, if it was a true pass look, he's winning 1/5 of those reps. He only had 3 sacks. He only had 20 pressures. I think some of that comes from the fact that he was a little bit misused. He was an edge to start off the season, and I think Clemson just wanted to get as much juice as they could squeeze out of him and the players that they had along their offense or their defensive line. I'm sorry. But when you saw him kick back in, I think you saw a player that was a little bit more comfortable with the position that he was in when he started playing that 3 tech role again. You even saw him at 1 tech. So he's a player that if they went even or odd, you definitely see him thriving a little bit more in the middle of the field. So I think that the productivity will increase as he's used in a more effective way. And then, once again, missed tackles, a little bit better for him. He did have a high missed tackle percentage last year, 16.7. Wasn't not as bad in the previous season, but something that I think he still needs to clean up and get better with. But like I said, all of the things he brings, size, athleticism, high IQ and understanding for the position, great use of hands, good burst. There are very few things to complain about with Peter Woods. And like I said, do it another season, man, and you're going to be a top 10 pick in my opinion. So, top 10 defensive tackles, interior defensive linemen, however you want to classify it. You have them right there. Running them back from 1 to 10. Once again, we have Peter Woods, Caleb Banks, Aaron Graves, Christian Miller, Daryl Jackson, all kind of that 3-tech role for me. Zane Durant as well, 3-tech. Tim Keenan coming in at 7, probably more of a nose tackle. Lee Hunter, Dante Corleone coming in at 8 and 9. And then Cade McDonald, another 1-tech that I have that rounds out my top 10. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Weekly Huddle. As always, we very much appreciate you hanging out with us, especially if you have made it this far and you've kind of stayed around for the full top 10. If you're enjoying this football talk, please hit the subscribe button. I know I say it like 5 times a video in every single video, but once again, it does help out, especially if you want to see what's coming up next. As always, you can keep up with the show on YouTube by searching The Weekly Huddle, and you can follow the show on Twitter if you appear at Weekly Huddle on the app formerly known as Twitter X, whatever you want to refer to it as. You can find me over on Twitter as well, over in the corner over there, at NFL Draft _Weston. I'm throughout the week giving out my takes, scouting notes, kind of pulling, especially my followers, get some information. I know as I'm starting to look at edge position, which is a really deep class as well, so that should be a lot of fun. But it's been a ton of fun talking about these guys. Like I said, a group that I really like. We'll catch you guys next time.